Good evening and welcome to a special election edition of 630 Central. I'm Rolly Hoyt. For the next half hour, we're getting you ready for this year's midterm elections. While we've still got a little more than 2 weeks until Election Day itself, early voting starts Monday. So tonight, we're going to take a closer look at all the races to watch. As well, we're doing a deep dive into those ballot issue questions that you've be asked to vote for as you head to those polls. So let's kick things off with the contest that's gained national attention. That's the race to be Arkansas's next governor. You'll see 7 candidates on the ballot. 4 of them, though, are write-ins. The other 3 are the people there on your screen. Republican Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's held a steady lead in every poll leading up to the election. She, of course, one of former President Donald Trump's press secretaries, and the daughter of former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Then we have Democrat Chris Jones, a Pine Bluff native, looking to bring his experience as a scientist to the political arena. And finally, Libertarian Ricky Dale Harrington. You may remember his name from the 2020 Senate race, U.S. Senate race, where he received more than 33% of the vote against Tom Cotton in a race without a Democratic candidate. Then we have the race for lieutenant governor, and the most notable candidate, current Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. She originally hoped to be a Republican candidate for governor, but dropped out of that race several months before the primary. She now faces Democrat Kelly Kraut and Libertarian Frank Gilbert. Next up, the race for Attorney General, where the current lieutenant governor is looking to pretty much make a switch in spots with Leslie Rutledge. That's Republican Tim Griffin, who spent the last 8 years assisting Governor Asa Hutchinson, as well as state lawmakers. He faces Democrat and attorney Jesse Gibson. And then the last race we want to highlight among the human candidates is the one for Little Rock mayor. While only people in the city will weigh in on this one, there is a lot of interest in this race throughout everybody watching the show tonight. You've got current Mayor Frank Scott Jr. facing off against businessman Steve Landers, Greg Henderson, and Glenn Schwartz. And we have new poll numbers for 3 of those big races that'll be on your ballot. This is according to a statewide poll conducted by Hendrix College and Talk Business and Politics. Sanders is leading the race for governor. 51% of people surveyed say that they'll vote for the Republican. Jones is about 10% behind her. Harrington sitting at about 3%. There are still 5% undecided according to that poll. And then you have the race for Attorney General. 57% say they plan to vote for Griffin. Gibson did get 31% and 12% are undecided. And as we look at the race for U.S. Senate, that's where current Senator John Boozman is sitting at 52%. Democrat Natalie James is at 32%, and Libertarian candidate Kenneth Case 3%. All right, let's talk about ballot questions. It's that section that a lot of us spend some extra time on to figure out what exactly we're voting on. Don't worry, though, we've got you covered. Let's take a closer look at the 4 ballot issues you'll be asked about when you head to the polls. The first issue you'll see on the ballot this year is about who has the authority to call lawmakers to a special session. Now, state senators and representatives meet every other year. The session lasts usually about 60 to 90 days, unless they vote to extend it. But special sessions are called on an as-needed basis. For example, they held a special session just this year to talk about the state's $1.6 billion surplus. Right now, Arkansas is one of 14 states where only the governor can call lawmakers into a special session. This bill makes it so that the state senators and representatives can vote to convene themselves. If the bill passes, then a special session would start if 2/3 majority of the legislators vote to meet, or from a joint proclamation from both the Speaker of the House and the Senate pro temp. The bill passed easily through the state legislature with a 30-2 vote from the Senate and 82-9 in the House. However, Governor Hutchinson is against the bill, telling THV11, "I will vote no on issue 1. The General Assembly is not designed to be a full-time legislature under our Constitution, and there would be insufficient checks on the legislative body when it has the ability to stay in session for any reason that the members support." So a yes vote on issue 1 on the ballot would give the state legislatures the power to convene themselves for a special session through a 2/3 vote or by a proclamation from the heads of the House and Senate. A vote no would keep the power to convene with only the governor. The second issue on the ballot changes the required number of votes that future amendments or ballot measures would need to be approved. Now, a bill only needs a simple majority, just over 50%, to get approval. Ballot issue number 2 would change that and make the threshold a 60% supermajority, 2/3 of everyone who votes. The bill's sponsor, Representative David Ray, says that it can be too easy to get something on the ballot, and outside influence can play a big role in what gets there.
Our initiative and constitutional amendment process is really susceptible to big money, out-of-state interests that really want to hijack our lenient ballot access laws and use those to essentially buy an amendment to our Constitution.
Others, like the Arkansas Public Policy Panel, say it's not quite that easy.
It's incredibly hard. I mean, you have to collect over 100,000 signatures to put something on the ballot. You have to follow very specific rules and regulations that the legislature has created. You have to write the measure in a way that it passes constitutional muster with the courts. And then after you do all of that, then you got to convince voters to vote for it, which is the hardest hurdle of all.
Arkansas is one of 38 states right now that require just a simple majority. Just 11 states require a supermajority in some type of way. A change like this could have a pretty significant impact on elections. Between 2000 and 2020, there were 40 proposed bills going before voters. 30 won approval, 10 were rejected. Of the 30 that passed, 18 of them received at least 60% approval. That means that 12 of the proposals in our Constitution today wouldn't have made it under the new rules.
Our state Constitution is our bedrock foundational document, and we shouldn't just amend it 4, 5, 6 times every 2 years in just sort of a willy-nilly fashion. It should really only be amended when there's something closer to genuine consensus among the voters.
To take that right away from citizens after 100 years is just the wrong direction for the state to move. Our state motto is Regnant Populus, where the people rule, but issue 2 directly undermines that state motto.
So when you see the issue on the ballot, a yes vote would change the required number of votes to enact ballot measures to a 60% supermajority in future elections. A no vote would keep it how it is so that a simple majority approves new laws. Ballot issue number 3 deals with freedom of religion. The U.S. Constitution says there can't be a preferred religion, and the government can't keep people from worshiping how they want. But it's not always cut and dried, like when they say you can't go to a church because of a virus. Issue 3 would put in the Arkansas Constitution legal language limiting how the government's rules can impact religion, even if the rules didn't set out to impact religious beliefs. Jerry Cox with the Family Council supports the bill.
Government cannot burden your free exercise of religion unless it has a compelling reason to do so. And then if they do that, they have to do it in the least restrictive means possible.
For example, the laws designed to limit large gatherings during COVID could be deemed unconstitutional because they would limit religious gatherings, even though the law didn't set out to limit religious gatherings in the first place. John DePippa, Dean Emeritus at UALR's Bowen School of Law, says the government would then have to prove that the rule is necessary.
If the state wants to burden religion in any way, it has to meet the highest level of judicial scrutiny. What that means is it has to have a really important reason, and it has to show that there's no other way to accomplish that reason except by burdening religion.
Given the First Amendment's religious protections, you would think this specific idea would already be understood. But for 25 years, there's been efforts to solidify the concept. Issue 3 is crafted on the federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. 21 states, including Arkansas, have a RFRA already in place after the Supreme Court ruled it wasn't applicable to states. Supporters say Issue 3 would take that rule in place and make it a constitutional amendment.
That essentially guarantees the same religious freedoms that the U.S. Constitution protects. And so we have it in the U.S. Constitution. If Issue 2 passes, we'll have protections in the state constitution as well.
So why do its supporters think it's necessary?
It's much, much harder to change the Constitution than it is to repeal a statute. Putting it in the Constitution makes it more or less permanent.
So, a vote yes would support adding the State Religious Freedom Restoration Act to the state constitution. A no vote would oppose making it a new amendment, but the state law would still be in place. Issue 4 is the evolution of a process seen around the country. It would legalize marijuana for recreational use for people 21 and older. Under the law, you would only be able to possess up to an ounce at a time. With any issue like this, there are a lot of questions about safety and how it'll be regulated. Eddie Armstrong with Responsible Growth Arkansas, the group behind the push, says they looked at those concerns when crafting the proposal.
What was a responsible well-regulated, meaningful way to approach an expanded industry, to not put just dispensaries or liquor stores on every corner.
The amendment would put a 10% tax on marijuana sales compared to the state's sales tax rate of 6.5%. That money would then go towards several initiatives.
We're going to be able to shift some revenues to law enforcement for personnel, UAMS cancer research accreditation. Our drug courts is where another proportion of the funds will go. But then you've got this $200+ million that are going into general revenue.
Medical marijuana dispensaries already in place would be authorized to sell the legalized product. Then 40 more licenses are going to be given out to others in a lottery system. But opponents of the bill, like Jerry Cox, are worried about how that will look.
This creates a monopoly for a small number of marijuana dealers. In a way, they're writing themselves into the Arkansas Constitution.
The bill had a rocky road to get onto the ballot. It's the only citizen-initiated measure this year after getting nearly 200,000 signatures, far more than the 89,000 required. But then it nearly met the same fate that all cannabis proposals have met in past elections, all except the 2016 vote for medical marijuana. Courts, commissions, or the Attorney General would often keep it off the ballot. But this time, the Arkansas Supreme Court cleared the way for this proposal to go to voters. So 6 years after passing medical marijuana, Arkansas could be the 20th state to legalize the drug for recreational use. And like medical marijuana, if this bill passes, the Alcoholic Beverage Control Division would then have to develop rules to regulate the industry, which is something Cox is wary of.
See, right now we have a medical marijuana board commission that oversees some of the medical marijuana. We have the ABC board that does some. We have a legislative committee that oversees some, and the health department. Well, this new amendment unplugs all that and just says, ABC board, you guys take care of that.
So, a vote yes on your ballot this November would approve legalized recreational marijuana for people 21 and over, initiate a 10% tax on marijuana sales, and require new rules to be put in place to regulate those sales. A vote no would oppose legalizing recreational marijuana here in Arkansas. All right, if you missed any of that, don't worry. You can find each one of those issues explained on thv11.com, or make it even easier. Text the word VOTE to 501-376-1111. We will send you extensive voter guides straight to your phone. There you'll get more about all of these issues, plus those big races and everything you need to know as you get online to cast your vote. Welcome back. Happy to have Charles King of Philander Smith College back with us to help us analyze the local political landscape as we head into the election. And good to have you. The polls out today from the Hendricks College poll would tend to indicate that Democrat Chris Jones in the governor's race is overperforming at this point. He's still 10 percentage points behind, though. Which is actually pretty good around here.
Absolutely.
Based on what you've seen of the major campaigns, how do you think Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Chris Jones might play out in a more purple state?
Well, I would tell you first on the poll, I think that it's a result of the hard work that Chris is doing. You know, he can't get any face-to-face other than earlier today over in Conway. So it may not be overpolling, but the purple part, I think that's a very interesting question. Arkansas is so red that you would think that it's a down and out case. But I think that people are beginning to say, let me take a second look at this.
Do you think it says anything about the future of the state, especially since we'll say at least 3 of our Washington leaders and the likely incoming governor would seem to have a profile for national office of some kind?
Well, Arkansas has been very fortunate over the last 20 to 40 years to always have someone on the radar for a national office. We've been successful once with Bill Clinton. Who knows, it may happen again, but I don't think it's going to happen with anyone that's coming up right now.
Let's go from national down to hyper-local here. A lot of folks are focusing on the mayor's race right here in Little Rock. What do you make of the recent, or call it recent, full-on embrace of seemingly progressive policies from Mayor Frank Scott Jr.? He's now a gun sense candidate. He's been endorsed by Planned Parenthood, and all this amid the disputes over crime rates in different big cities. What do you make of this shift? How much of it do you think was brought on by his opponent, Steve Landers, at this point?
Well, not much by Steve. I think that the crime rate in Little Rock is a reflection of everything that's happened across the country. Now that Mayor Scott has had almost 4 years in office, he's been tested on the left and on the right, and I think he's coming to a good spot that if he's successful, as the polls say that he will be, then he'll probably move more to the moderate or purple, if you would.
It's funny how the Little Rock race is kind of complicated to explain, and it'll be one that we probably have to do a lot of explanations on election night because it's got that runoff. Do you feel like there's enough momentum in the city for Mayor Scott to get to 40%, or any of the candidates to get to 40% first time out?
You're absolutely right. It's all about the numbers, and we know that Arkansas has one of the lowest voter turnouts. It's not a presidential election year, so we don't know who's going to come out. I think we're going to end up with a runoff, but we ended up with a runoff the last time, and Mayor Scott prevailed at that time, and we'll see what happens this time, but I think he will.
Really quickly while I've got you, from a wider focus, what would you think if I told you several years ago that a black Little Rock politician, the likes of Eddie Armstrong, would be on the precipice of bringing legal marijuana to this state? How does that strike you when you say it that way?
Well, I tell you, first of all, Eddie Armstrong, no matter what color he was, he's a smart guy. So if anybody could do it, Eddie Armstrong could. And he's done a great job at it. The numbers show that almost 2-1 that Arkansas will be in favor of it. And I'm really glad that Eddie had this opportunity to bring it to the forefront.
It's I've heard other people analyze Arkansas as it's a very red state, but it's a very populous state, and it would seem that Responsible Growth Arkansas has tapped into some of that populism, and they're headed towards getting that ballot across.
Yeah, if you look at the last 25 years of transition from being one of the only southern blue states to a red state, you pretty much have the same people voting today that voted 25 years ago when we were blue. So go figure.
It's fascinating stuff. It will continue to be that as we head towards election night. Charles King, thank you for being with us. We're going to have more when we come back.
All right.
Okay, we have talked about what will be on your ballot. Now let's talk about when you can cast it. Early voting starts on Monday, October 24th. The hours for early voting days, Monday through Friday, will be 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. and then on 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. on Saturday. There's no Sunday early voting. The last day of early voting will be the Monday before Election Day. Polls will close that day at 5. If you do plan on early voting, be sure to check which polling place you can cast your ballot. It might be different from your regular precinct. And of course, Election Day set for November 8th, Tuesday. Don't forget, you can find everything you need to know about voting and what you'll be voting for in the THV11 voter guide. Just text the word vote to 501-376-1111 and we will send the link right to your phone.